Today, Martin Sheen is here with Melissa Fitzgerald, and we're going to see sort of a brief retrospective of his career. He's been working for a long time, doing some amazing roles, and so what we put together here is essentially a clip reel of some highlights of his work going back to, actually before my time, certainly, and some iconic roles in Badlands, of course, Apocalypse Now, historical characters, or historical films always, both Kennedys, RFK and JFK, RFK Sr., in case you're worried, and as Brett mentioned, he's best known locally, Robert E. Lee. We're going to see a touch of that with another local favorite. Stephen Lang is in it, and he'll be here tomorrow. And then we get all the way up, everyone's favorite president, and many more roles. I don't want to go through them all. You're going to see them momentarily. And then there's going to be this fascinating conversation with one of America's iconic actors, and really who's become a great friend of Gettysburg and to our film festival. What an amazing man, a real life lesson in how to treat other human beings, and Martin Sheen.
Well,
thank you very much.
We're going to talk over each other. I think probably that will not be the first time. But first of all, Martin has been here and been a supporter of this festival for several years, as long as it's been going. And this is my first exposure, and I just wanted to thank you, Martin, for inviting me to be part of this. And thank you to everybody who works on this film festival, the staff. Everyone has been so wonderful, and it's been fascinating so far. So, Martin, I'm going to start with the beginning. You and I have worked together as actors and activists for close to 30 years now. I think Monument Ave was pre-West Wing, like 1997. And you bring such joy and love and respect, honesty to every set you go to and every place that you go.
Not everyone, but most
well, everyone I've been on. And you bring that to your work, and it seems to me that you were born to be an actor. Can you share with us when and how did you know that you wanted to be an actor?
Yeah, that Emilio and I wrote a father-son memoir some years ago in connection with the film The Way, and thank you, yeah. I talked about my life as growing up in a very large immigrant family in Ohio in the 1940s and 50s, and I remember going. I remember having this feeling. I think all children have it. They can't always express it. That they don't have the facility, and they don't know where it's going to land, so they kind of keep it to themselves. Any of you that are parents, I'm sure you experience that in your children. You have to draw them out, so that they can tell you their dreams. And I had this feeling as well. And then I started going to the movies, and I was around the age 5 or 6. There was a local movie in our neighborhood, and gradually it dawned on me, oh, I'm one of them. I was about 5 or 6, and I never questioned it from there on. It was never any question or doubt. It was just a question of committing to it, and I kept it all of my life. And my dad, God rest him, was a factory worker. He was an immigrant from northern Spain. For those of you who don't know, my real name is Ramon Estevez, and I never changed it. I just used Sheen so that if this acting gig doesn't work out, I can go back to some of the stuff I did as Ramon. But I had this tremendous how could I say possession of myself with that knowledge that I could do that all those people up there were doing, and it gave me a possession of myself, and it never wavered. I love what I do for a living. And it's always great fun, and I always try to remember to give thanks and praise that I was able to do it pretty much all my life, and to join and work with some extraordinary people like this young lady sitting here through 7 years of the West Wing, and also we did a film together, I think you mentioned it, called Monument Avenue in Boston with who's the wonderful...
Well, Dennis Leary.
Dennis Leary, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember because Martin is such an activist and has been arrested so many times protesting, and it was a low-budget movie. And I remember the director, Ted Demme, coming to Martin saying, "Now, Martin, this is a low-budget movie. We can't afford to lose any days, so don't get arrested until after you're done." Well, you've also said that your father was your first hero.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that, and would you share with us what it was like when you told your father that you wanted to be an actor?
Well, we used to... I was born in 1940 in Ohio, and my mother was having a very difficult birth. My parents had 12 pregnancies. There were 10 survived, 9 boys, 1 girl. I was the 7th son, and the first one born that survived in the United States. And in those days, they would use what they call forceps. Do they do that now with children with the babies? I don't know. Pediatricians do that or not. But it's basically a clamp that they insert and pull the child out if it's stuck in the canal. That's the reality of it. And I was stuck in the canal, and they used the clamp to pull me out, and he fractured my left shoulder. And so my father always thought that I was not physically capable of making a living as a laborer. And so he wanted me to go to college. And he put a little money aside every year for me to do that. I was determined to go to New York as soon as I finished high school. And we used to have these arguments about it all the time. I once took the entrance exam to the University of Dayton just to satisfy his demand that I do it, and I flunked it on purpose. I think I still hold the record at the University of Dayton. You can check it out in the admissions office. I think I got 3% out of 100. Yeah. And I was worth every percentage point. And at any rate, so we would have these arguments, and it got closer and closer through my senior year that I knew I had to start planning to go, you know. That would have been in late 1958 and 59. And one night, my dad and I got into an argument about my going to New York. And he said, my dad was very sweet. Even in the middle of an argument, he called you honey. So it's true. It was so endearing. He'd be furious. "Oh, honey, what are you going into there? You can't do this. You can't do this. Come on." That's the way he talked. I used to love to hear him talk. And sometimes I would get a rise out of him just to hear him roll his R's and carry. I loved him. So he was from a little town called Pararuyas, Salto de Revolta in northern Spain. It's near Tui, which is near... Oh gosh, it's just on the cusp of on the Minho River that separates Spain from Portugal, and yeah. So he was very clear about his image of what you had to do to be an actor, and so he said to me one night, "I swear to God, this actually people think it's a Hollywood story. It's not. It's a father-son story in Dayton, Ohio." He said, "Oh, honey, what are you going into there? You don't sing, you don't dance, you don't play the musical." And I said, "Pop, you come home every day, you make the supper, then you sit down here every night and watch Westerns. You're watching one right now. Do you see anybody in those shows that sing, dance, or play a musical instrument?" I swear to God, he said, "But you don't know how to ride a horse either."
That is fantastic. You've also described your dad to me, and it just struck me because I see the same quality in you as the most honest man you'd ever known.
He was scrupulously honest. Yeah, it was. Sometimes it was. You know, he just wouldn't compromise. You know, he was also very, very shy. He rarely spoke outside the house because he wasn't comfortable with his accent. He spoke 4 languages. You know, his first language was Spanish, and he spoke Portuguese, and he learned Italian in the factory in Ohio, because most of the people in the foundry there were Italians, you know. And then my mother taught him how to speak English. My mother was from Ireland. She spoke Gaelic and English, and they became citizens together. And we were campaigning together during the campaign, and I was in Ohio with Senator Brown, and they had a big rally planned for Dayton, my hometown. And we pulled into this hotel downtown, and everything has changed since I grew up there, you know. But I just wandered out one afternoon, and I realized the building next door was St. Joseph's Church. My mother and father were married there in 1927. It was called the Immigrants' Church. There were so many Polish and Italian and Irish mainly, and that they all migrated and were drawn to that little church. And I hadn't been in there in 50 years, I guess. Yeah. So, yeah. I've started recording a podcast. I'm the only one in America that does not have a podcast.
Well, it's time.
I don't know. I don't have a computer. I never learned how to work one. And I've gotten to the point where some part of that I'm kind of comfortable with. You know, I have a cell phone that I normally keep in the car for emergency, and I pray for never to have emergency. I'm not comfortable with technology. But my wife Janet, whom you know, my daughter Renee, have insisted that we create a podcast. And so, okay, we started. What's it going to be about? I thought, well, we'll call it Poetic Justice. We'll read a lot of poetry, and I'll make stories and such. And come, okay, fine. We started recording. This is months and months ago. Then Renee found out we couldn't use that title. There were like 90 other people. Can you believe that? People just, and then we tried to change it, and it'd be just my name. There were some people that owned my name. It was like, how did that happen? At any rate, we finally got it rolling, and hopefully we're gonna start airing it. That's not the term you use, is it? When you air, it's like the radio.
So.
No,
drop it, air it.
We're gonna okay, yeah, and so I think we're gonna be ready in August. So if you hear about, it's the Martin Sheen podcast.
I mean, what could be better than that? Nothing.
Please?
Nothing could be better than that.
Oh, well, we'll see. Yeah, but I told the story about my dad, which is my favorite memory of him. I won't spoil it for you. But he took me hunting once when I was 8 years old in 1948. And it was one of the great days of my life, being with him. And I won't spoil it. You listen to the
we'll tune in.
podcast.
All right, so let's get into some of the projects here. Badlands. It's considered to be a quintessentially American film. It explores the American dream, disillusionment, violence, the American West. I remember when I first watched Badlands, I was so struck by how disturbing it was, but also how I was drawn to Kit and to Holly. And I'm just wondering why you think that is, and what drew you to play the role of Kit Carruthers.
Well, in 2 words, Terrence Malick, the writer-director, who just had he had such a vision, but he's a very shy man, personally, but his cinematic choices are so personal, you know. And artists always say if something's not personal, it's impersonal. If it's impersonal, who cares, you know? So, he takes it very personal. It was his first feature. And I came into his circle, I guess. I went to this hotel in Hollywood on Franklin Avenue, you know what it is, to audition for a pair of trousers for some ad or print ad. I don't know what it was. I'd do anything, to try and make a buck. But and I was coming out of the hotel lobby, and I walked down on the street, and I turned to walk to my car, and there was a lady, and banging on a window. There was a big window in the lobby of this hotel, and she's banging on the window. And I thought, oh, she wants me to come back. I got the trousers commercial. And so I rushed back in, and she said, listen, I'm casting a film. And I told the director about you, but he doesn't think you're right. He thinks you're too old, and he has a different idea about, who he'd like to go with in this film. But I think you can do it, and I think you're right. Would you do a little audition? And this is back in 1972, and so they didn't have all the cell phones. You've done these, right? You do a little audition just standing or sitting in front of a little camera, little black and white video camera, right? And somebody off camera would say a line, and you respond through the lens, so that they can play these to the director and the producer, and they can start making choices about who they think can do this part. So she said, would you do a little audition like that? I would, I said. So she gave me a couple of scenes, and I went out into the street, and I was just walking around, and I sat down somewhere in one of the neighborhoods around that hotel, and I thought, this is very familiar, this story, just from the scenes I was reading. In fact, it was based on Charlie Starkweather and Carol Ann Fugate. I don't know if any of you were aware that back in 1958, I believe, a mass killer, infamous mass killer in Nebraska. And so I went back to the hotel. I memorized a lot of the lines, and I did this little audition. And she said, well, I'm going to play this for the director, and we'll let you know. And I forgot all about it. A couple of weeks later, Terry Malick calls me, and he said, I love doing an impersonation of him. Any of you know who Terry Malick is? You've ever heard he talk? Yeah. Okay. Oh, God forbid if he ever hears I did this, but he kind of talks like this. He's from over there in Texas. He was born in Oklahoma, but Martin, I grew up over there, and I have this great love for nature, and he was a very devout guy. He grew up in a Presbyterian boarding school, met the love of his life as a child there. And he had this singular vision. And so I did the film, obviously, and we got to one scene we shot most of the film in La Junta, Colorado. And there was one scene we did in this museum in Pueblo, and that was called the Rich Man's House. And in that scene, while Kit and Holly are messing around in the house, a guy comes to the door to see the guy we're holding hostage. And the day that we shot the scene, it was the last day we could use this location. And the actor who was supposed to come and play it, I don't know who he was, he just didn't show up. I know something happened, he couldn't make it. So Terry said, well, I'm just going to do it. I'll just do it outside, and then we'll reshoot it later. I said, okay, fine. So if you see Badlands, there's a scene. He comes to the porch. He's got a hat on. He's wearing a seersucker suit, and he wants to see the guy in the house, and I'm turning him away, saying, no, he's got the flu. Oh, well, I just want to leave a message, And our whole relationship since that scene was altered by the fact that he insisted to reshoot it. He did not want to be in the film. It's the only argument we have ever had. We still fight about it today. But I'm so glad that I wouldn't vow to him getting another actor, because it's the only time he's ever appeared on camera, and he's quite lovely. Yeah. And what was the question? My God.
You answered it.
My God.
You answered it. It was just what drew you to Kit Carruthers, and you said two words, Terrence Malick, which is great.
Yeah. He did Days of Heaven, his second film, which is one of my favorite films as well. At any rate, yeah, we became very close. And in this book I mentioned that Emilio and I wrote called Along the Way, I tell the story in the book of why I was going through a crisis in the late 70s, early 80s. And I ended up in Paris doing this film. And one day I was walking down the street, and I saw this guy on the other corner, and it was him. And I said, Terry, is that you? Well, Martin, is that you? What are you doing here? I said, well, he was living in Paris the next day, writing film, and he married a French lady, and he was living there. And so we renewed our friendship, and he was largely responsible for me returning to my Catholic faith. So I owe him quite a bit. Yeah. Long live Leo the 14th. God bless him. You know, when one of the lads told me that it was an American pope, and I said, oh, dear God, not Dolan. With all due respect. But, yeah, I think we got a good one.
And he's a tennis fan, I heard, from Andrew Bernstein, who is in the audience. For those of you who don't know, Andrew Bernstein was one of the directors on The West Wing who came out here to surprise Martin.
Where is he?
So I'd like to move on to Apocalypse Now. It's one of the most iconic war films ever made, and it came out just a few years after the Vietnam War ended.
Yeah.
How did working on that film, if it did, change your perspective on the war? And at the time, were you nervous about how it would be received and how audiences would respond to it?
I'm only laughing because I'm still trying to figure it out. Just for, I always say this, man, if anybody had told me that what was in store when I arrived in the Philippines in the spring of 1976, I would have said, I think I'll pass, you know. And a lot of guys did. I know it's a historic film, but, you know, Francis had, I think, Bobby De Niro, he wanted him, Al Pacino, and Jack Nicholson, and a lot of the big stars of the day. And they all kind of turned him down. They knew something I didn't, you know. And so actually, I was in Italy doing a film, and I had a few days off. And but one night, I got a phone call in the middle of the night, and it was Fred Roos, the producer and the casting director as well. You know, he passed away last year. Fred Roos passed away, as well as Francis's wife.
I think Eleanor?
Eleanor, yeah. Gosh, they're all... You know, I was looking at some of those clips today. There are very few of those people still with us. Did you know? It's really interesting. I'm a big fan of TCM. You know, I get the so-called God device, and I can't, you know, and I get to an old black and white. We watched Spencer Tracy the other night, and what's her name? Who? No, before Katharine Hepburn. Lana Turner, and Spencer Tracy played a judge in Minneapolis. He was so, I adored him. He taught you how not to act, you know. He was so, again, that's that personal, you take it personal, you know. But Apocalypse was out of the blue. And as I say, I was doing this film in Rome in 1976, and I was getting near the end of it. One night the phone rang, and it was Fred Roos, and he says, so when are you finishing that film? I said, well, I got another week or 10 days, but I'm off. This is Easter weekend, so I'm off. He said, well, would you think about coming to Los Angeles? I said, yeah, sure. So I hung up and went back to bed, and Janet said, who was that? I said, it was Fred Roos. Oh, what all did he want? I said, well, I think they want me to replace someone in Apocalypse Now. He said that? She said, I said, no, but why would he bother calling me, you know? And that was actually what happened. And I went home that Easter weekend and met Francis at the airport in Los Angeles. He was on his way back to the Philippines. And I got stuck in, where they look in your luggage. What do you call that? The nosy guys, you know. What is this? Where'd you get it? But this is before TSA. But customs, yeah. So we'd been in Italy on this film called Cassandra Crossing, and we were just finishing it. And Janet asked me to take all of the winter clothes home So when we came back with the kids in a short time hence, why we wouldn't have all this stuff together. So I had like a half a dozen duffel bags filled with children's clothing. And I got to, it was a direct flight from Rome, and I landed in LAX, and the custom guy said, "Are you in the haberdashery business?" And I said, "No, these are my children's clothes." And he said, "Where are they?" I said, "Well, they're in Rome." He said, "Well, what are they wearing these days, you know?" Oh my God. I said, okay. I was in that line for an hour and a half. And Francis was waiting up in the Philippine Airlines lounge for me. And Fred Roos was trying desperately to get me out of customs. It took that long. Finally, I went through the bag. Oh, they thought I was selling it. So I went through the bag and I found holes and things and tears. And I said, "Would anybody want to buy this?" And that was what did it. They said, "Oh, I guess you're right." And threw them back in. And I lugged all this stuff out. But I only got to spend like 10 minutes with Francis up in the lounge. He was headed back. And sure enough, they wanted me to replace a guy that I became very fond of. I don't like mentioning him publicly. It was a Harvey Keitel, who was very sweet. And we worked, the first film I did after Apocalypse Now was with Harvey in Mexico. And I forget what it was called, but I remember him.
All right, so I'm going to move on to JFK. When they asked you to play JFK, I know that you didn't originally want to do it.
No.
Can you share the story of what made you change your mind?
I said this because I tell this story on the podcast.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
All right, then maybe we'll skip it.
No. I loved John Kennedy and Bobby. They had a profound influence on all of us my age. And in 1983, a British company asked me if I would want to play him. I said no, and I don't think anyone should. Why not? He said, well, I said, we knew him. Everybody knows what he looked like, what he sounded like, what he did. There's more footage on him than any president because of all the modern technology. He was beloved. I said, and I couldn't do him justice. It's not possible. And I don't think there's anyone that could. So I passed. And by they came back and said, well, what if we did this and we did that? And I'm not talking just about the dough. I mean, yeah, they offered a little more dough. That doesn't hurt, believe me. But that wasn't it. It was the script, and it was the presentation of his image. And so I turned it down again. They came back a third time. And I was on the verge of turning it down again. Each time I would get the offer, I would read the new script to see if and it got better, as it went along. But my wife Janet said, maybe you should seriously consider playing him because you loved him. And if by your playing him because you loved him, you may prevent somebody from playing him who did not love him. And that did it. I said, you're right.
The lesson is to always listen to Janet.
Listen to Janet, yeah.
And I agree. She is very wise.
Where is Anne? Our friend came down from Washington. Okay. Anne, this young lady, we became friends over in, do you mind if I say a little bit, Anne? Okay. This remarkable lady, I met at a dinner for the people who support the White House Historic Association, and we had a mutual friend, and you were at that dinner.
I sure was.
Yes, well, you know Anne.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
Hi, Anne.
So Anne came up to me and was just effusive in her praise of a film we did called The Way, and how it had sparked something deeply rooted in her life and was a source of grace. And so we became friends, and I was astonished that she used to live just over the hill where we live in California, in Westlake Village. And we've learned just recently, we're trying to find her. She's not there. She's in Washington, D.C. She moved there. Am I right to be with your children? Yeah, okay. So at any rate, I'm getting a plug-in for the Way.
As you should. And I more than almost any other project other than the West Wing, when people talk to me about West Wing and you, they always say the Way and how it has inspired them. Even last night we were stopped multiple times about the Way.
Yeah, Emilio wrote it for me and directed it and appeared in it as well. And it's the best thing I've ever done, and it's the thing I'm most proud of, you know. And we still get a lot of response from people who are just discovering it. You're a makeup artist, this wonderful lady
Abigail's
here.
going to do it.
Abigail is going to do it. She just told me this morning. And so, you know, there are those projects, and I was hoping they would show a scene from the Way here with all the others.
Next year, film festival.
Next year, okay. Incidentally, maybe I shouldn't mention the possibility of coming back here in October. Well, the lads have asked me if I would consider coming back for a screening of Apocalypse Now and do a Q&A like we're doing. And I'm seriously considering that. So, we'll see. But only if they show the Way as well.
I think people would love that. All right, let's move on to another role that at first you didn't want to play. Robert E. Lee in the film Gettysburg. Right here on the ground where the battle actually took place. Now, can you share with us how you came to play the famed Southern general, and what was the biggest challenge that you had in capturing such a complex and polarizing figure?
Well, Tom Berenger had a lot to do with it. He kept calling me and said, I had a feeling, I don't know this, if anyone does, I'd like to know, but I think someone else was cast and got ill or got another job or fell out or for whatever reason. Because the day I accepted, they said, you've got to be in Gettysburg tomorrow. I said, I haven't even been fitted for the wig or the beard, you know, and I don't ride a horse. You know, like my father was right. So, yeah, I did a quick study, and there were so many wonderful people here, and I just felt I joined a community. And Tom was very insistent that I play it, and it was a pleasure working with him and all the lads, you know. Yeah, it's a very memorable. I knew very little about Gettysburg, to tell you the truth, and we rented a house out on the edge of the battlefield, and so you know where it is. That I haven't been there since, but we would look out, and we would see in the distance the peace lamp, you know, yeah, and so that's where we spent that summer, you know, doing it here.
What was it like filming it right where it happened and seeing that peace lamp? Like, what did that do for you?
Well, you know, it was a saying, you can't swing a cat for hitting a monument, you know, and so we had to cover up a lot of the monuments because they were they were marking places that we wanted to celebrate, but they weren't there when the time we wanted to celebrate them. So we had to cover them, and I don't know what. I don't think they were moved. Does anyone know? I think they just moved a few. I shouldn't be saying that. What? Somebody? What? Get the police. What? Because they're so coveted and should be. But I was really impressed with the love of the project. Everyone involved was, and we had like 10,000 people here, not all at once, but we would have reenactors. These guys would come, and gals, and they would set up camp and live create a little community where we were going to film, and the houses were, and the roads were covered with, gravel, or not gravel, but dirt, yeah, because there was no pavement back then. But the people were so appreciative of what we were doing and so supportive, And there's one of the greatest scenes ever filmed in any battle anywhere at any time, and that was I think it was an original drone, a movie drone, that they laid down the end of the field. And this is not, you could practice the movement, but not the guns. And they started the scene with firing the first cannon, and then you've seen it, right? And it never stops, and it reveals boom, 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 boom. My God, when they talked about you could feel the guns in Philadelphia, you got a sense that, oh, I get it, Yeah, there were a lot of guns. But that shot lived with me. I said, my God, I've never been a part of such a thing. There's another moment that, I told this story last night. My dad was right. Okay, I didn't know how to ride a horse, but I would never admit it, And so I knew I had to ride a horse, a very famous horse named Traveler, right? So they got a guy from Illinois, a young guy who had 2 horses. They were white, and he was going to bring them down, and they were going to be the horses. Okay. Well, one I think was a stallion, and one just couldn't be bothered with me. It's like she was like docile. Renee said every picture that there is of she knows which horse it is because the horse is just nodding. Like that. So the first time I was on her was the start of a battle scene, and the first cannon. It wasn't that long scene, but it was somewhere before we got into the big fight. A cannon went, and the horse went up. Oh my God! I guess they don't have cannons in Illinois, and, and so this poor guy was just shaking like this. So he told me, the guy, he said, look, all right, the stallion is a little, but let's learn to ride this mare, and we'll wake her up. So we were getting ready for a big scene with literally thousands of guys to engage. And so he said, look, this is a perfect place to ride this horse now, and you'll learn a lot about her. It's all downhill. Just start up here. She has to move faster than she normally does. It's downhill. And so you'll learn how to control her and what to do. I said, all right. And it was about a quarter mile, and I got up on the horse, and hey, there, boom, come on now, come on now, please. And she started making, and then gradually, and then she started really going. And we got down to the tree line, and I'm turning her around to go back up. And suddenly, 3,000 men in Confederate uniforms came out of the woods. They were there waiting to start the scene. That had nothing to do with my horsemanship. It just, and they started yelling, Bobby Lee and General Lee and and it was like I was saying, oh no, hey, it's good to see you, all the best, yeah, good, I got to get back up, all the best, yeah, here we go, turn the horse, and they wouldn't let me go. They surrounded the horse, and but that's when I realized how serious they were taking it. I was Bobby Lee to them. I was General Lee, not this old silly actor trying to learn how to ride a horse. And so I finally extracted myself, and I worked my way back up the hill. And here comes Ron Maxwell, the director. Martin, get back up there and do it again. We're going to film it. and it's in the film. Yeah.
Well, now I'm going to have to go back and look at it through that lens.
Yeah. But it was remarkable of the dedication to history and all of the. I was just very impressed with the work they did. I'll tell one more little story. I see these lights coming on. Does that mean get off the stage?
Yeah, it means we're going to have to wrap it up soon.
Wow.
But I can't cut you off. Come on.
Yeah, you can. Okay, one last story. I did a little tour with Gettysburg, and I don't mean this is any offense at all, but it started over in New York, and Ted Turner, was the source of the financing for the movie. He appears in the film. he plays a general at the Pickett's Charge. And so he led the publicity over in New York, and in those days, this is back in probably 92, I guess. So the way they would promote a film in those days was before, all the, the conveniences we have today. They would rent a floor of a hotel normally, and all the people in the film would go from room to room. Here's ABC, here's NBC, here's CBS, here's PBS, here's the New York Times, all the newspapers and magazines from all over the country would gather. And so Ted was leading us in this parade of interviews. And so you'd walk into a room and it'd be set up like this and lit, and you'd sit down and talk about the film, and then get up and go out, and somebody else comes in right behind you. And so I came out of a room about halfway down the hall, and I looked up, and Ted was coming out of a room he'd been interviewed in, just at the corner. And Martin, he said, did you tell the Times that Ted Turner gives the rich a good name? I said, yes, sir, I did. Well, thank you so much, he said. The other story is, we went to Washington. I was coming out of the film in Washington. There were two old guys. I don't know who they were. They could have been in Congress or who. And one old guy says to you, well, it's a pretty good film. Hell, I think it's longer than the battle. And then, that was terrible. But I went to Atlanta, and I arrived late in Atlanta, and it was in a big theater, and there was no middle aisle. It was like one gigantic aisle. So I was 20 minutes, half hour late, and I'm working my way across. Excuse me, pardon me. Hey, sit down over there. What's the matter with you? Oh, yeah. Sorry. And I worked my way over to the center and found a seat. Okay, and we're watching the film, and gradually I hear this voice behind me. Well, now there, over there, Long Street, see, that was not a good move, and we're going to see where that affects the whole outcome of the battle. Like that, yeah. Then it goes on to another sequence. Now you see there, the Pickett's Charge was a very bad decision. And he's going, I'm thinking, this guy, he knows a lot about it, but he's spoiling it for all the folks, So I said, I didn't think he knew there was an intermission coming, and I was going to get to him at the intermission. So the lights came up at the intermission. I turned around. Oh, glad to meet you, President Carter. I had the honor of getting to know he and his family a little bit, and this December before this last, I was asked to give him an award, a Heroes Award from CNN over in New York, and one of his grandchildren was going to receive it, and I tried to learn as much as I got. I knew a lot about him, but I realized I didn't know anything, and he had just, when he left the White House, he wrote a book called Keeping Faith, and he kept notes almost every day. He kept a diary, so he had a real reckoning of when things happened, who was involved, so forth. And that book was so powerful. And so I read it, and went over to New York, and I put some things in my speech that were in that book. At any rate, if you want to know, people, well, we know what a great man he was, but people say, oh, he wasn't much of a president. I got news for you. He was a great president. And one of the things I knew, everyone knew that he brought Menachem Begin and Anwar Sadat here during the Camp David Accords, that they couldn't get anywhere. And he brought them down here, and he talked about children, took them along the battlefield. It's in the book, too. And he asked to look at their pictures, if they had any pictures in their wallets of their children. And he said, what kind of future do you want to leave for them? Look at this battlefield. Nearly 54,000 young, able-bodied men slaughtered each other for an ideal. And no compromise. So he says, think of that. And they went, and they made a deal. That was the start. It was here in Gettysburg.
That is incredible.
Yeah. So that's just one of his achievements, but I adore. We're getting that light again.
I know, but we have
like
we have one more question. We have because we have to talk about the West Wing, don't we? So I just have 2 West Wing questions, and then I'll wrap it up, I promise. But could you walk us through the first time that you read Aaron Sorkin's pilot script for the West Wing, and what made you take the part?
Well, it was Aaron Sorkin, and I had done American President. I played with so I knew his quality of writing, and I loved the script. But the single most contributing factor was my first line was, "I am the Lord thy God. Thou shalt not have false gods before me." If you remember that, that was Bartlet's first line. So
What an entrance.
yeah, and you know the story because when I got hired and signed on to do it, I was only hired for like 4 or 5 episodes in the whole season, so that meant maybe 1 every 4 or 5 I don't know. And then they saw the pilot, and I watched it, and I thought, I think they're gonna want to know who works in that office.
And when it was you, how could they not make you every episode?
Oh no, it was great fun. It was one of my most rewarding times in my whole life to play that character, to be part of our community, and we can't shake each other. Let's be honest about it, But we've stayed so close, and we just came off the campaign trail last year with all of us.
Yep.
Going around, particularly in some of the battleground states, and so we stay very close and follow each other. And you're very close with your boss in the story,
With Allison.
Alice and Janney. These 2 are like sisters, and so we cheer for each other, we support each other, and we're just so nourished by each other's company. Whether it's Allison or Melissa or some of the lads. We just did it. I just did a thing in over near Washington, a signing with Dulé Hill.
Oh yeah, with Dulé.
Yeah, and Richmond, and
Brad.
Brad. Yeah, and it was like, it's a very beautiful community, and so we support each other, and I'm bragging, and I'm taking up a lot of your time.
No, I love this because it leads me to the next thing, which Mary McCormick and I wrote a book about the West Wing that came out last year, and I just and thank you, and we showed it to everybody before it was published. If anyone wanted to make any changes, that we interviewed if we got anything wrong, and Mary and I made a decision not to show it to Martin before there was. And we did that because there's a chapter in the book that is dedicated to Martin, and it's called Number One of Number Ones. Now, on a call sheet, which is the sheet that you get every day when you're shooting a TV show or a movie, every actor has a number, and then it gives you your time and what scenes you're doing. And the lead is number 1. And Martin, of course, was our number 1. And there's a saying, as number 1 goes, so goes the show. And I think that's true in every area. And Martin is the reason that we are still a family. He's the reason that we became so close. He's a reason that there is a West Wing family. Because Martin treated every single person on that set with kindness, dignity, respect, no matter what our roles were, no matter what our jobs were on that show. Martin Sheen lifted every single person on that set up. And there was, of course, a dedication to excellence and having a very high bar, which Martin and John Spencer set for all of us. And obviously the scripts were incredible, the subject matter was incredible. But I feel like that perfect combination, which is Martin Sheen, is the reason and the magic and the glue and has kept us together all these years. It's 25 years.
Thank you.
And last night, when we were leaving the event with the Ken Burns event and the film event last night, Andrew Bernstein and I were both saying, you know, I said, I'm so glad that you were able to work this out to see Martin. And Andrew said, you know, I just love him so much, and it makes me so emotional to be near him. And we all feel that way about him. Doesn't go away. And getting back to why we didn't show him the book is because we knew that he's so humble that he probably hates that I just said all this stuff, by the way. And
Yeah, so now it's my fault.
and true. He's so humble that he would have made us take that chapter out, and there was no way we were doing that. And I'm just going to read this one little part from the book, and it says this. Not long after the West Wing ended, Martin and I were driving to San Diego together for the opening of the Kroc Institute for Peace and Justice. He said, you know, Melissa, I didn't go to college, but people always say those were the best years of their lives. They just wish they had appreciated it. Then he said, the West Wing, those were the best years of our lives, but we did appreciate it. We knew. I said, Martin, you're absolutely right. We all knew. You couldn't not know. And that is you. So thank you all very much, and thank you, Martin Sheen.
Please join us. We're in a very historic spot in a very historic time. When we were out on the campaign trail, we began each and every rally or meeting with America's favorite hymn. Would you join us? Oh, beautiful for spacious skies, for amber waves of grain, for purple mountains' majesty, above the fruited plains. America, America, God shed his grace on thee, and crown thy good with brotherhood, from sea to shining sea. Thank you. Thanks for doing that.